Welcome. Today we are talking about tax scams. We're officially in tax season. We're already a month into it. Can we believe we're in March? I can't believe it. My eyes for allergy season can definitely believe we're in March. But as I look at the calendar, it's hard to believe we're actually here. And tax scammers are out in full force. Now, tax scammers don't necessarily go away once tax season is over. I just want to say that at the very top. Tax scams can happen all year round, but they are especially prevalent around this time of year as everyone is doing their taxes. So this is why we always talk about tax scams right now, because they're most prevalent. But that doesn't mean that those IRS phone calls, the fake ones, can't happen outside of tax season, but we'll get to that as we go through the presentation. My name is Bailey Parker. If you've never been here before, I am the Communications Director for the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. This is where we're headed today. We're going to go over some quick filing tips. So how you can file if you haven't filed already, and then talk about the basic protection tools from tax fraud. There are some protection tools that you can use that really are the basics to protect you from tax fraud. Then we're going to talk about how tax scams or tax fraud actually can happen. And then we'll go over those red flags. What to watch out for when you get those emails, when you get those text messages, when you get those phone calls. What are the red flags of those scams, tax scams, or really any scam, but especially tax scams? What are the red flags so you know what to do when they pop up? Let me give the disclaimer. I'm sure so many of you are tired of this. I'm not an attorney. You don't want legal advice from me. This presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading any laws we discuss. I don't think we're going to talk about any laws today specifically, or seeking any legal counsel. The department can't give you specific legal counsel anyways. This presentation is merely serving as an introduction and overview of the topic. So I mentioned that we're going to talk about some filing options up front. The reason I mentioned this during tax scams is because this gives people an idea of where they should be filing. You should not be filing with any random person. You shouldn't be filing with the man on the street who says, yeah, I'll do your taxes for you. Okay, let's not do that. He may give you a good deal, or he may say he'll even do it for free. But you don't want to be giving over a large amount of your personal identifying information to some random person, right? So let's talk about some filing options real quick. For filing federal and state taxes, there are really two options here. You can file electronically. More than 90% of taxes filed in 2020 were filed online. Taxpayers who are filing online are likely to have fewer mistakes on their tax return. Why is that? It's usually because when you're filing online, whatever resource you're using, whatever software you're using, will often find mistakes. If you mistype something, if you are putting in incorrect numbers, say you put in a period somewhere where you shouldn't, oftentimes it will catch those things. Filing by paper, this increases your chances of error because you're doing everything by hand, and they just take longer to process. So we always encourage people to file electronically because it's also faster. You're going to get your tax refund so much faster if you're filing electronically. But the key here is to do it safely. We'll talk about how to do that. So there is some free file software, but there are qualifications here. So if you made less than $73,000 in 2022, you may be able to file your federal and state returns using free filing services. You can go to DOR and IRS's websites. Again, you don't have to feverishly write down these URLs. If you download the slides, you can just directly click on these links and see if you qualify. And you can use these services for free. What you'll need to find out if you do qualify is your income statements or 1099s, or 1099s, sorry, dependent and spouse information, things like that. So just know you are going to have to give over information to see if you qualify for the file-free software. The Department of Revenue does approve, they have a list of approved commercial software where they say they give general recommendations for these softwares. I'm just going to give you the link to where to go. Here are some examples. So there's federal and state online filing options, approved tax preparation softwares on their website. There's way more than this. It's not just these 5 options that you see here, okay? The list is very long. This is just a couple of options. Now, the information has been updated since 2022. The picture just hasn't been updated. So this link will take you to the updated website, including, so it goes down the list here. So you can search through for your best option for yourself. Now, this doesn't mean that these are free filing options, okay? So the reason I say this is because Intuit TurboTax actually got into some trouble. Was it last year? Or even, it may have, it wasn't this year because this year's 2023. So I think it was last year that they had to end up paying a lot of money to the FTC because they were claiming you could free file. But it didn't end up being true for like over 90% of people who went to free file on their services. So just know that these are not the free file options a lot of the time, but DOR is a really great service. They have a really great website to see what services you qualify for. The IRS has the free file fillable forms if you really want to use, you want to go in and you want to do it yourself manually. You can e-file with these fillable forms. So you can fill it out by PDF electronically. You're just going to have to do this page by page manually. It's not going to be like a TurboTax or a TaxSlayer or whatever, where they're going to do a lot of the work for you. Only basic calculations are going to be performed here. A lot of other tax softwares are going to do the calculations for you. The free file fillable forms are not going to do a lot of that. All information is deleted on October 20th of every year, so your information is not going to be saved. A lot of other tax softwares that you're paying for will actually save your information year to year. So then that way, when you go to file your taxes again with the same service, you don't have to transfer information. You don't have to re-enter information. It just transfers information over. That's not the case here. You're going to have to enter in information again and again. Now, you may say to yourself, well, that's okay. I'm fine doing that. That could be something you're willing to do. This could be a good option for you. And you do have to create a new account every single year. You can't do your state taxes with this. And state e-file is not an option for this. So just know this is only for federal. You'll have to find out another way to do your state taxes. What you should be double checking if you're going to do your taxes either by hand or even through a tax preparation software is you always want to double check your identification numbers and your figures, especially those identification numbers. That is your ID, right? That's you, and you want to make sure it is going directly to you. You don't want to mess up one number and then it identifies as somebody else. If you're doing it by hand or you're doing it in those free file forms, you want to check those tax tables, make sure you're filing in the correct areas. Sign your forms, okay? You have to sign your forms. And your spouse, if you're filing jointly, you both have to sign them. The IRS says that this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is that people don't sign their tax forms after they're done with their taxes and they submit them, especially when they're doing them by hand. So then they get all these tax forms turned in and they can't do anything with them because they're not signed. Okay, so please, please, please make sure you sign them. And if you're filing jointly, your spouse or partner, whoever you're filing jointly with, has to sign them also. That's another one of the biggest mistakes that the IRS says they see is, okay, the filer will sign, but then the joint person on the joint return doesn't end up signing. So then they have to send it back. So please sign your forms. Send your return to the correct address. Now this may seem kind of like, well, duh. Why wouldn't you send it to the correct address? So this can get confusing, and you always want to double check. If you're mailing in your return, you want to find the correct mailing address at the irs.gov website. So you can go to irs.gov and they will tell you the correct addresses to send them to. Here are some other common mistakes: not choosing your right filing status. So like you're filing jointly, but you choose that you're not filing jointly. Or you choose that you're filing jointly and you're not. You put in your wrong social security number. So you don't double check your identification number, and because that would qualify as an identification number, and you accidentally put in one wrong number. And then you underreport your income is another common mistake. And if you need an extension, I know we're in March, so maybe we're not thinking about extensions, but you can request both state and federal extensions that give you 6 more months to file. You have to file that extension by April 18th. And usually, I think that April 18th deadline stays the same every single year. It was the 18th last year, it's the 18th this year. I think it stays the 18th every year. This does not mean that you get an extension to pay what you owe. I think that's a common myth of like, oh, well, then I just get 6 more months to pay what I owe. No, this gets people into a lot of trouble. There's a penalty rate for filing late of 5% each month late, capped at 25%. So if you owe money, if you know you don't owe money and you know you're going to get a refund, okay. But if you owe money and you know you're going to owe money, they're going to charge you basically interest. I don't want to say interest, but it's going to be a filing late fee of 5%. 25% is a lot, guys. And I've heard stories of people having to owe thousands of dollars more because they didn't realize that when they filed an extension, that wasn't an extension on also paying late. So just keep that in mind. And you can fill out when you download the slides for this. I just want to mention this. I have a lot of notes that also come with the slides. So you may download this and be like, whoa, Bailey has a lot of notes in here. I think the notes are helpful because they've got a lot of extra information of like links and things. It's got direct links to DOR filing and like tax topics, also like different forms. So like the form that you would need to fill out for an extension is the form 4868, things like that. So if you do download the slides, don't be shocked if all of a sudden you download it and there's like on the right hand side, like tons of notes show up. Okay. Again, I just mentioned that form 4868. You can find that on DOR's website and the IRS's website. Refunds, you can get these in a couple different ways. You can get that in direct deposit. You can get it in a debit card, and you can get it in a paper check. What I'm going to tell you is, when it comes to fraud, the direct deposit is the safest way. Debit card is the second safest way, and I think the paper check is the least safest way. Is that grammatically correct? I don't know. Paper checks are easy to steal. So are the debit cards, because they're going to come straight into your mailbox, right? So I would say if you have the option to choose the direct deposit, use it. You can choose direct deposit for not only your state refunds, but you can do that for your federal refunds too. These are all the reasons why I think you should choose direct deposit. Okay, it actually does save tax dollars. This graphic is directly from DR's website. The reason it saves tax dollars is because you're not paying for paper checks and you're not paying for debit cards, and you're not paying for the time of having to send those things out, all of that. Same thing goes for federal returns, except for they don't have the debit card option. The paper check, I think, is just not a safe option, okay? Scammers steal mail all the time. So if you can choose a direct deposit, please do so. It's so much safer and it's so much faster. So you're just going to get your money faster and it's a more secure way. All right, so protection from tax fraud. What can you do? How are we going to file online in safety? I've sat here and talked about how filing online is probably the best option. You're going to make less mistakes. So how can we protect ourselves, though, especially since there are hackers out there and all of that stuff? When you're filing online, if you can, please use an antivirus software. And don't do your taxes like at Starbucks on open Wi-Fi. Don't do it at the library. Don't go on an open Wi-Fi server. And when I say open, that means like you're just connecting to an open Wi-Fi that doesn't have a password. You want to use a secure internet connection that has a password. And that's not just a password that's open to anyone and everyone, okay? So please make sure that you're on a secure connection. You're doing this in the safety of like your own home, and you're not doing this out in an open area. Use strong and unique passwords on these profiles, whatever software you're using or online service. Use strong and unique passwords. Use a password manager if you can't remember those passwords. And enable multi-factor authentication whenever possible. I know all the major tax services now use multi-factor authentication. What that is when they give you a second option other than a password. So you put in your password and then it sends you a code to enter. So either an email or a text that you then have to put in that code. It's the top cybersecurity tool that the average consumer can use to keep their account safe. Use it. It may seem like an extra step. It may seem inconvenient. It will keep your accounts secure. Again, don't use public Wi-Fi, okay? It's not worth it. Those connections are not secure. And if somebody is connected to that same public Wi-Fi who has any intelligence in servers or how to get into internet connections, they will see everything you're doing. They will see everything you're entering into that software. They will see you logging into your bank accounts. They'll see you logging into your Facebook. They'll see everything that you're doing, okay? So it's not just don't do your taxes. It's don't do anything that would require your personal identifying information on a public Wi-Fi server. Get an identity protection pin. So this actually used to only be something that was for victims of identity theft, but now it's for everybody. This changed, I think, just last year, and now everyone can go and apply for an identity protection pin. So you can use this, you can verify your identity through IRS's IP PIN program. And you can do this by going to irs.gov, or you can even, I've got the phone number in the notes. You can apply for this PIN, and you can use that PIN when you're doing your taxes. Even on online softwares, the online softwares will ask you, do you have an identity protection PIN? If you're using a tax preparer, a legitimate tax preparer, they'll also ask you, do you have an identity protection PIN? And they'll enter that in for you. So consumers should make sure that their preparer is reputable. So how do we do that? You want to make sure that your preparer has a tax identification number themselves from the IRS. You can do that by going to this link, where this link is going to go to the irs.gov. And this link is going to go to verify the status of an enrolled agent. And then we have a whole little sheet. I'll actually click on it so you guys can see it. We'll open it up. For more tips on how to choose a tax professional, but this will show you just a preview of what it looks like. So choosing a tax professional, this gives you tips on how to do that. So what is tax fraud actually? So tax fraud or tax identity theft is when somebody uses your social security number or other information to steal your tax refund or for work. So people oftentimes find out that they've been a victim of tax identity theft or tax fraud when they go to file their tax returns, or they get a notification about having somebody filed for benefits in their name. When I was looking at the numbers from the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they said the number one way that people found out was when they went to go file their taxes. They got a notification saying, you already filed taxes. And the number two way was the IRS actually notified them. So the IRS reached out and said, hey, somebody's filed your taxes. And usually it's because they didn't use the identity theft PIN, that tax, the identity theft protection PIN that they had applied for. So that was the second way that they had found out. So what are the different ways that tax fraud is actually happening? So we've talked about the ways that you can file, and we've talked about what tax fraud actually is. Well, how is it actually happening? So the one that we all hear the most is these IRS imposter phone calls, right? So somebody calling you and claiming to be from the IRS. I hope we all know that the IRS is not calling you, okay? And I mentioned at the very top that these calls can happen any time of the year. This isn't just from January until April 18th. We are getting these phone calls from the quote unquote IRS all year round. The IRS themselves says we are not calling you at all. If you owe the IRS any form of money, they say, if we're going to reach out to you, the first time is we're going to reach out to you by mail. The second time, we're going to send you another piece of mail. And the third time, the IRS themselves isn't even going to call you. They actually hire out a third-party debt collector to call you for them. So the IRS isn't even calling you directly. So if anyone calls you and the caller ID reads IRS, that's not going to happen, okay? And if anyone calls you and claims to be the IRS and that you owe them money and you need to pay them, nope, just hang up. It's not real. It's not going to be real. The IRS says it themselves. We're not calling you on the phone directly to collect your money. It's just not going to happen. And they're not going to demand any form of payment over the phone. That's another thing they say. If they were to call anyways, they're not going to demand you to pay over the phone. So just know that. So just last year, the FTC released these numbers just last month. So the IRS imposter phone calls, or imposter phone calls, text messages, emails, they kind of lump these all together. They had 3,152 reports in 2022. And of those 3,100 reports, there was $6 million lost just to those 3,100 reports. And 16% of the people who reported a loss. So we know that people are losing a ton of money to these scams. And they're happening on social media. It's not just over the phone. So we talked about how people are calling on the phone and saying, "Hi, I'm the IRS." But they're happening over social media too. So all of a sudden you get a message from a friend on Facebook who's offering to either do your taxes or to cut your taxes. They love to impersonate family members, co-workers, friends. What they can do is they can easily copy somebody you know's profile and message you and say, "Hey, I know it's tax season. I'd love to do your taxes for you. I've been doing my taxes for this many years. I can do them for you for free." That sounds so tempting because taxes can cost, some money if you're making over a certain amount and you don't qualify for the free filing. So please be suspicious if anyone is just reaching out to you out of the blue, especially when it comes to social media. This is where scammers can really confuse people because they can make profiles that look exactly like your family members or your friends. And you can say, "Well, that looks really legitimate. I thought I was already friends with Bobby, but maybe his profile got deleted, or maybe he renewed his profile or whatever." So please, please be suspicious of individuals who are all of a sudden reaching out to you offering to do your taxes, or they're going to get you some incredible refund. That's another big offer of like, "I'm going to get you twice the refund that you'd be able to get on TurboTax." Fake charities. So around this time of the year, people love to come out and say, "Hey, you should donate to my charity because then you'll be able to put it on your tax return." No, don't. Guys, first of all, it's too late. It's too late to claim any donations to charities. You'll have to claim a donation to charity on your next year's tax return. And legitimate charities will provide an EIN, so a tax number, to you. And you should always ask for that. If somebody gives you pushback, if somebody says, "Oh, no, I don't have my EIN," or "You don't need my EIN, you don't need my tax number. Why do you need that?" If somebody gives you pushback, that means they're sketchy, and that means you shouldn't work with them, okay? An EIN or a tax number is something that a real nonprofit or a real charity will have and will be willing to give you. And if they're not, they're a scammer, okay? So just beware of scammers who are looking to take advantage of your kind heart, all right? This is a common one around this time of year, especially taxpayer advocate services, or sometimes they'll refer to themselves as TASs. This is a new twist or a newer twist on the IRS impersonation phone scam. So you'll receive a call from somebody claiming to be from the Taxpayer Advocate Service. And they say they're an independent organization within the IRS. They'll even spoof the actual phone number for the IRS Taxpayer Advocate Service office which is in Brooklyn, New York, or Houston, Texas, because this is an actual thing within the IRS. The key here is a taxpayer would contact TAS first. TAS is not just going to reach out to you. They're not going to contact you out of the blue and be like, hey, what's up? We want to help you with your taxes. We think you qualify for free filing, or we think this, we think that. You have to reach out to them. So if you get a call from anyone claiming to be the TAS, and the caller ID says it's the IRS Taxpayer Advocate Service, and you did not ask for a callback, and you never called them, it is a scam. They're making these unsolicited phone calls, and they're using the IRS's name because they know that you trust the IRS, right? The IRS is a government agency. That's how scammers work. They're using the IRS's name to make you trust them. Scammer tax preparers, people out there acting like actual tax preparers, but they're not. So there's a thing called ghost preparers. And what ghost preparers are is they're a paid tax preparer who's not on the IRS's radar because they don't have a preparer tax identification number or a PTIN. They don't sign the tax returns that they prepare. They often lie about the income or your income to get higher refunds. And then they direct the refunds to their own accounts. So by law, anyone paid to prepare or assist in preparing taxes must have that PTIN, the Preparer Tax Identification Number, which is when I talked earlier about vetting your tax preparers and going to the IRS's website and making sure that PTIN, that is what you're looking for. If somebody's saying they're a tax preparer, they have to have that PTIN. And if they're like, oh, I don't have that on me, that's a red flag, okay? Phishing scams. So one of the most popular ways is sending out fake emails acting like the IRS, or even setting up fake websites that look like the IRS's website. The IRS is never going to initiate contact with you through email about your taxes or a refund, or even in the past, it was economic impact payments, stimulus payments, things like that. Please just don't click on any links claiming to be from the IRS. The IRS is not emailing you about your taxes. Again, same concept of the IRS is not calling you about your taxes, okay? Here are some examples. So this is a fake email. They use the IRS's actual logo, but here are some red flags here. If you were to click on the actual URL, it's coming from user@domain.com. This would be coming from the irs.gov if it was from an actual IRS email. It doesn't matter if it has a real logo. Anyone can use a real logo, guys, okay? And it doesn't matter if they're using the actual IRS's address. I've heard people say that before. Oh, well, they use the real logo and they use the real address and phone number. It doesn't matter. I can use anyone's real phone number and real address and real logo on my emails. Does it mean that I'm associated with them? No. Another huge red flag here is dear user. If this was the IRS and they knew you, and they should know you by name if they're emailing you, they would know your name. This should say your name, and it doesn't. If you do not get acquainted with the new policy, your administrative responsibility may take place. First of all, the language in this email is crazy, okay? It's very formal and weird, and this is like a threat in a type of way. Like, if you don't look at this, your administrative responsibility may take place. I don't even know what that means, but the IRS isn't forcing you to do anything. And what it wants you to do is open up this attachment. If you click on this, either it's going to download malware on your computer, or it's going to take you somewhere where it's going to ask you to give over personal identifying information. Another example is this right here. It says it's coming from the IRS, but if you actually expand it out, it's IRS@getrefundnow.com. No, again, it's always going to come from irs.gov. They use the real IRS logo. And look, this one seems great. You're going to claim your tax refund online? Yes, $419. I want $419. This is where people get caught. People want that money. And they're like, oh, but what if it's real? The logo looks pretty legitimate. All I got to do is get started. Got to click get started, and maybe I'll get $419. This is how people get hooked. And then what's going to happen most likely is you're going to click here and you're going to have to enter in your information, probably your social security number, and then you're going to give over everything and have your identity stolen. Even text messages now, you have an outstanding tax refund of $265 for tax year of 17-18. Please fill out the following form to process your refund. And then the URL is very weird, and it's not secure, by the way, because there's not an S after the HTTP. But hmrcgovme.com, If it's not a .gov website, guys, don't do it. It's not worth it. And just because it came from GovRev, I've heard people say that before, like, well, it says it was coming from a Gov. No. Just because it says Gov in the text, they can make their texts look like they're coming from anything. Don't believe this. You always want to hover, and what hovering over a URL means is just placing your mouse over a URL so you can see where it's actually going. It will show what the URL is actually taking you to, because very likely it's going to take you somewhere else that's not real. And remember, these are just a few examples of what can happen. This is not an exhaustive list of every possible tax scam, okay? So what really matters is how to recognize trustworthy sources of information and how to spot scammers. So this is what you need to look for. You need to look for that lock and just irs.gov. That's it. This is the only place you should be going. And every federal government website now has this banner at the top with an American flag, and it says an official website of the United States government. They did this as a security measure because there were so many people who were trying to copy their websites. Now, that does not mean that scammers couldn't do the exact same thing, but they started doing this just as a security measure. But always make sure secure lock right here and just irs.gov. You're not going to irs.com, irs.edu, irs.co. It's irs.gov. That's it. Same thing here, and the IRS will never call to demand immediate payment through prepaid debit card, gift card, wire transfer, or cryptocurrency. They're never going to demand that form of payment. They're never going to threaten to bring local police to have a taxpayer arrested for not paying. The police don't do that. It's not how that works. They're never going to demand that taxes be paid without giving taxpayers the opportunity to question or appeal the amount owed, which is why even if a debt collector that is hired by the IRS calls, they're not going to demand payment right when they call. You will have the opportunity to question and appeal the amount owed. And if you don't know, you can always ask, hey, can you send me that in the mail? And they will. Ask for financial information over the phone. They're not going to do it. They're not going to say, hey, can you give me your bank account information? They're not going to do it. The number one rule is, with any scam, please, 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 do not give over any personal or financial information to somebody you don't know. This means if somebody is calling you out of the blue You did not expect somebody to text you, call you, direct message you, show up at your house, whatever. You did not ask them for that correspondence, for that message, whatever way they're showing up. That is one of the biggest red flags. If you didn't ask for them to reach out and they start asking for personal or financial information, you don't do it. And I would say, even if you did ask for them to call you back, I would still be suspicious, okay? So please do not give over any of your personal or financial information to somebody that you know, or don't know, sorry, don't know. Okay, so let's close this out real quick. I want to share some information before we get done. If you think you've been a victim, please call us. That's what we're here for. I mentioned at the beginning, we have an identity theft unit with 2 full-time employees answering your phone calls, actual human beings answering the phone. So please call us. Even if you just have questions, you're not quite sure if you've been a victim, they're there to talk to you. So please give us a call. So thanks so much for coming today, and hope you learned something new. And file your taxes early. The earlier you file, the more chance that a scammer can't file them for you. All right? Thanks so much, guys. Bye.